Halloween forever.
Guys, it's almost here. It's almost spooky season. I'm having a lot of fun. We had a big Halloween party last night. We'll talk about it, all that stuff. But I've been having kind of a rough day, honestly, around here. There's been this demon baby that's just been like hanging around my house.
Oh, yeah? Somebody leave that after the party?
Somebody must have left a god dang old demon baby around here after the party. And it's just like, I'm kind of hungover. I'm tired. I don't want to deal with it. So it's kind of frustrating. But I know eventually I'm going to have to, address the hell infant in the room. Bicycles to a very spooky Minisode of Halloween is Forever. I'm Brian.
I'm Steve.
Hell infant in the room. It's like an elephant in the room, but it's a hell infant.
I know.
In the room.
Like your first...
You didn't see it coming and you're mad because it was too clever for you.
I don't know about all that. I definitely didn't see it coming, but it's just like...
I know.
The
look on your face was of just pure apathy.
Because also you, I don't know. I felt like you maybe didn't hit the delivery the first time. Because
I botched it.
Because no one's told that joke ever.
Yeah.
So
guys,
it's
listen,
just hell infant? Is that what I wanted to say?
Hell infant in the room. And I kind of second guessed myself. Yeah, wasn't great delivery, guys. Bear with us. We, had a little Halloween party last night. This, if you're listening to this on the day it comes out, it is Monday. Guys, get ready. It's what we call around here Devil's Night. Or Mischief Night, some people call it Cabbage Night. I don't know what the fuck that means. Basically, tonight's the night where you really get down to some serious Satan worshiping. All the spoopy shit, your hocus pocusing and your TikTok spooky desserts and cocktails, all that stuff's out the window. Now we're down to brass tacks. We're here to do a couple things. We're here to worship Satan, right? We're here to do, honor his infernal majesty. We're here to do crimes, sex magic, all the real deal stuff for Halloween. This is fucking crunch time. This is like point of no return here, guys. But we did have a Halloween party. We're recording this on Sunday, the day before it comes out. And Saturday night had a big old Halloween party over here. And oh boy, howdy! I drank a whole bunch of beers and some whiskey, and no water. And as we were discussing when it got on, before we started recording here, my piss looks like maple syrup, I think, and I gotta go to the hospital.
Yes.
But yeah, we were hitting it. We were hitting it pretty late into the evening, right?
Yeah,
we had to be going until after midnight, I think.
Yeah, well, I mean, the party kind of wrapped up around 12:30, and I tell you. I on my way home, I for sure had my belief in the devil renewed. Because I tell you what, I'm driving home. It's dark, spooky night, and guess what comes on the radio?
What came on?
Good old Dracula. It's Dracula. It's fucking Dracula.
Burning through the witches, digging through the ditches, burning through the witches the whole way home. I love to hear it. It was great. The weather held out for us, and I'll tell you what. I woke up, 12. I think we were partying until about 12:30. That's when kind of, party broke up. I mean, it did start at like 4. So, and like I said, I was drinking since about 1. And then, everybody kind of went home and stuff. It was, we're old. So 12:30 is pretty late. But then I was up for probably another good 2 hours after, cleaning everything up, I hate waking up to a mess. Yeah. So clean the whole damn place up, drinking some more. And then I woke up at about 3:30 with a pounding ass headache, and it was storming like a son of a bitch.
Yeah.
Spooky, dark, stormy, windy, thundering and lightning like crazy. So we just dodged a bullet there. So we had some good weather, had a little bonfire, drank some beers, had some laughs, playing grab ass. So it was fun. But yeah, your boy is tired and still, at least vaguely hungover at this point.
Makes sense.
There we are, Yeah. That's how Halloween's all about.
Yeah, I too was up. I was still up at like 3:30, and I was watching my cozy murder mysteries.
Sure you were.
And then
Columbo and
I'm actually on Midsummer Murders right now, but I was doing Midsummer Murders.
Murder, She Wrote right after that, right?
Yeah, pretty much. And then out of no fucking where, just a thunderstorm at 3 a.m. on in October. I was like, oh, is that the devil? Oh,
yeah, I know. I thought the good old devil was just rapping at the door, but made for a nice spooky end to the night. So
yeah.
But here we are. Like I said, we got to let's get our electrolytes in us. Let's get let's start drinking blood. Let's start praying to Satan, doing all the things we need to do because it's Devil's Night. We got to wrap this Halloween spooky season up with a bang. And we are going to do it in a very appropriate way, I believe, because on this here Minisode, we're going to talk about a brand new flick that's getting a lot of attention, a lot of people talking about out there. It's called When Evil Lurks, you guys. We're going to talk about that here in a hot second. Did a little limited, theatrical release, I believe, and then just released a few days ago here on the Shudder, which is where I watched it. Didn't get a chance to get out the theater. One didn't see it in the theater, but it's like the closest theater was playing. It was like an hour away. I was like, having a party, got to get the house ready. Ain't got no time for that. So did it on the old Shudder. But before we get into this movie, we got a whole bunch of other shit we got to get out of the way. First of all, probably some new listeners. It's the week of Halloween. Halloween's in the name of our podcast. So we probably got a whole bunch of thousands of new people listening to our voice for the very first time. Welcome. Thanks for listening to the old Halloween's Forever podcast here. If you like the show, you want to continue listening, do us a dang old favor right now. If you're driving, again, take your eyes off the wheel, both hands on the phone. Mm-hmm. Just let Jesus take the wheel. Open up your podcast app, do a little follow, subscribe, hit the plus sign at the top, whatever. So when we have some new episodes coming out. We do spooky ooky minisodes or once a month, a full-on showdown episode, which we'll talk about here in a second, every dang Monday. Every Monday, spooky ooky shit weekly on the internet. We also got some other fun stuff to talk about here. But if you like the show, you've been joining us throughout this spooky season, or maybe you listen to us for a long old time. All you got to do, go down. If you want to help out the show, go to the show on your podcast, app or whatever the hell you use. Scroll down to that rating system. Maybe it's stars or whatever the hell it is. Give it the max amount of stars. And then you got to write a little something, say like, hey, I like this here podcast. Something super easy like that. And that helps a lot. Gets the show in front of some new eyes. And like I said, this time of year, that's a big deal for us because we got a lot of new listeners this time of year. Also, if you do that and you want to send us a little DM on the social medias, you go to @HalloweenIsForever on Instagram or on Twitter or whatever the hell, we got TikTok, we got all that stuff. You go on there, shoot us a little DM, say, hey guys, I reviewed your show. Like the podcast, I'll send you some dang old Halloween is Forever stickers in the mail. I'll send it right to your dang house. So, yeah, do all that stuff. We appreciate it. If you like the show, thanks for joining us. Now, let me explain what we do that special first Monday of every month, what we call a showdown episode. We get a guest on here, and it's me, and it's Steve, and a guest, and we do a little three-way match, right? What we do is about a week ahead of time, maybe 2 weeks ahead of time, depends on how many Mondays are in that month. We throw out 3 different topics that come off this big old spinny ass wheel we have of a bunch of different topics, like dozens and dozens and dozens of them. And we refresh that once a year. We get all these topics. We pull 3 of them off there. They could be subgenres of horror. It could be a particular performer. Could be anything. A lot of different suggestions for topics that we've got from our social media listeners that we put on there. And then we pull 3 of them. We put them out on Instagram and Twitter. Our listeners and social media friends help us vote on it on a little poll, and then you pick one. So for November Showdown, which will be next week, believe it or not, the topic was that was voted on, selected by Yin's guys out there, was revenge horror. So a lot of different directions we can go in there. And we did, suggest, we're going to keep an open mind on what constitutes revenge horror, but we're not talking about just like revenge movies in general. It has to be a horror flick, right? How do we define that? Remember, we were talking about what is and what isn't. We talked about how Last House on the Left, that's revenge horror.
For sure.
But perhaps, a Death Wish with one Mr. Charles Bronson, although that is definitely a violent revenge movie, don't think we would call that a horror movie so much. That's more of a revenge action movie, right? So that's kind of our point of differentiation. That's how we're kind of defining what's horror. Now, Steve, tell us who's going to be joining us as our guest here for this here November Showdown episode.
Yeah, so joining us this month from the Hops and Box Office Flops podcast is one of their many cast of characters. They have about 4 to 5 different, rotating mics in there, but it may be safe to call him their leader. They sent their leader as representation. Is TK.
Ballsy move.
Yeah, ballsy move, but TK, also known as the Thunderous Wizard, also known as just Tom. So he'll be joining us.
I love that. TK, mysterious.
Right.
Thunderous Wizard, obviously mythical name there.
Yeah.
Or just Tom.
Or just
your boy Tom.
Yep.
Well, so what was Tom's now we usually let the guest, not always, but we usually let the guest, as a courtesy, allow the guest to pick what their movie's going to be, and then whoever takes home the championship strap for the month after we each pick, I guess I should suggest what the hell the end of that means. Once we pick a topic, then we each pick a movie that's associated with that topic. And during the Showdown episode, we each talk about the movie. We pitch an argument for why we think our movie's the best of the 3. Then we pick it apart. The other people, try to, poke holes in their logic. And like I said, somebody's going to get a diamond cutter, probably. Somebody will occasionally throw some tacks out on the ground and DDT someone on, some steel chairs will start flying around. And ultimately, we vote. Somebody takes home that son of a bitch and championship strap for the month. Steve's coming in on a little bit of a win streak here.
Mr. October.
So, Mr. October himself. So Steve gets to choose the order. And I believe Steve was gracious enough to allow TK, our guest, to choose his movie first. And then you're going to have to fill me in after that in terms of what order we're going to go in.
Well, you can go ahead and pick next.
Oh, okay. All right. So what's TK's movie going to be?
So TK's movie is You're Next, directed by One Ty West from 2011, I believe.
Yeah. So this is a pretty well-known flick. Kind of an interesting. I mean, Ty West, obviously, big name in the genre.
Or no, not Ty West. My bad. Adam Wingard. I always confuse the two of them for some reason. I feel like because they both had like movies come out at similar times.
Yeah, and I just trusted you because when you said Ty West, I was like, I didn't know he directed that, but I just went with it. I would have just completely taken it because it does feel like it could be a Ty West movie. Adam Wingard. Anyway, well-known flick, kind of a fun little twisty type of revenge flick from 2011. So that'll be fun.
Yeah, it's also because Ty West is in the movie. He's an actor in the film. So
okay, all right, all right. I also didn't recall that.
Yeah. He's I believe he's one of the party goers. So yeah.
Gotcha.
I had just forgotten. That's why I'm all confused. I'm all confused and out of sorts.
We're all messed up. We've been drinking on it. We've been melting our brains with drugs and alcohol. All right. So I am kind of stuck between 2 movies. Dang. All right.
Ding dang.
I've got a few that I'm thinking of, and they are radically different timelines here. I am going to go with, even though we've talked about this movie quite a few times on the show, I feel like it's been, suggested, talked about. We've hinted at it. I think we've even referenced, maybe even parts or scenes from it. And I think we might have even talked about it when we talked about like some of our favorite, theater going experiences. For me, this was up there. I'm going to talk about a flick starring our Lord and Savior. One of our Lord and Saviors, Mr. Nicolas Cage. And I'm going to go with 2018's Mandy. Very much a revenge movie, almost a revenge. Well, we'll talk about it, but almost a fantasy revenge horror adventure type of movie set in a modern setting. I love this movie.
Yeah. It's all over the place. So it's got, it has one of the most unique looks because all of Panos Cosmatos' works do.
Visually striking stuff for sure. Yeah.
I don't know if he's like burnt out on LSD or if he was just born that way and his mind is just plugged in that, to be a 70s drug case.
Yeah.
Like
it could be a little bit of both.
Yeah. I imagine his brain looks like in when Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, where they open up the suitcase inside in the hotel room and it's all drugs of different types. I feel like that's what his brain looks like.
Yeah, it's just a tackle box of all different types of hallucinogenic drugs. And that movie tied into probably why I liked that movie so much the first time I saw it, because of the state of mind that I was in. But yeah, we'll talk about it, guys. We'll talk about it when the time comes on next week's episode. But I'm going to be talking about Mandy from 2018. So what is that? That leaves it up to you, Steve. What are you going to pick?
I have two, also very wildly different. There's a film from 2017, and I just simply didn't have enough time to go back and rewatch it to like confirm if I thought it was good enough for the showdown. So I don't know, but it's just simply called Revenge. Like, all
right, what year is it?
2017.
2017.
So it plays out not there. Yeah, it plays out not too differently from like The Last House on the Left or I Spit on Your Grave. Like it's similar to that. Then I have another pick that could be. I think I'm gonna take a wild swing, and I'm gonna go with this one. Because it's wilder, and like I said, Revenge is very just in the same vein as those other ones that we know, but it's slicker and it's updated. I'm gonna go with The Toxic Avenger from 1984.
Okay. All right. 1984's trauma classic, The Toxic Avenger. It's actually fun we've not talked about that movie before, being that you're Steve. For those of you who knew the show, Steve's a big trauma buff, but we've not actually talked about any Toxie films before. But it's very apropos, as we saw, some trailers and teasers drop for the new one that's coming out.
Yup.
Yeah. All right. I've not seen that Revenge from 2017. I feel like I've heard good things about it, but for some reason, between the title and some of the people and whatever, I'm just like, I kind of feel like I know what it's going to be, which is not fair. I should still watch it. I think it's been on my letterbox for like 2 years, and I've never watched it.
Yeah, I feel like it's not really going to surprise you or anything, but which is also kind of why I'm gonna like. There's one kind of surprising, dubious thing in it that's just like, that's kind of wild, but it kind of plays out. Not too dissimilar from the other, like the 70s films exploitation. Yeah. So yeah, I'm going to go with Toxic Avenger because the revenge in that film is, and why it specifically has to be the first one is, you're introduced to this wimpy, nerdy Melvin Junko who is picked on and he's bullied. And then he's thrown in radioactive waste, and then he gets his revenge by crushing everybody's head in gym equipment.
He does do a lot of murder with gym equipment, which I'm starting to realize is kind of a I don't want to say a kink of yours, but I feel like that's something we've talked about multiple times in the last month. Or you talked about not murder size. What was the death spa? Didn't you talk about death spa on another podcast recently?
Well, let's see. Month or two ago, I was talking Death Spa and They Called This a Movie. Right. I made a suggestion on our 31 Days of Horror on our Patreon of a movie called Tragedy Girls. And somebody gets killed with gym equipment. Like, it's almost basically ripping off the Toxic Avenger in that movie. But, it happens. Yeah. 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 So, like, it's not, it happens. If you win this time, I feel like we're going to watch Murder Size, because that one's been on my my to watch list since it came out a couple months ago as well. You're not too thrilled about that one? I did watch Murder Size in the past like month as well. So yeah, I watched it and it didn't do it for you. No, it missed. It missed. I'm sorry. I thought a lot of the promos were really fun, but I got the feeling that it was going to be kind of a build up, and maybe it wasn't going to deliver upon closer inspection. But I don't know. I'll probably still get around to watching it. It's on Tubi. It's free. Why not? Yeah, go watch it on the Tubi. But two
to wrap up, to summarize, if you want to watch along and check out these flicks before the Showdown episode next week, TK from Hops and Box Office Flops, he is going to be talking about Your Next from 2011. I'm going to be talking about Mandy from 2018. And then Steve's going back to 1984 with The Toxic Avenger, which I kind of like that too, instead of having a bunch of like 2010s movies all together.
Look,
here we get to go back and split it up a little bit.
I have to take a wild swing because you took Mandy, so putting something slick like Revenge up against Mandy isn't going to cut it, because Mandy is both slick and far more interesting to look at. But maybe I can grab TK with the nostalgia angle,
with
and the funny, nostalgia,
the comedy,
or just, maybe, I don't know, maybe Panos doesn't do it for him, but I can grab him with, I think Ron Jeremy's in the original. Yeah. Maybe
he said, listen, it was a smart pivot. I'm not going to lie. I think it was a smart pivot. I'm surprised you let me go first. Anyway, so go check those out. All right, couple more quick things before we get into to the feature presentation for this here week. First of all, we haven't talked about beers yet. I know we were talking about how we were mildly hungover, but I know, listen, this is our last episode before Halloween. It's like I said, it is officially Devil's Night. I got to get with the program here. It's no time to be a coward. So I popped a beer. You got a beer over there as well?
I do.
All right. What do you got? You go first.
It's sort of appropriate. It's not, like right in line, because it's not a candy beer, or it's not a pumpkin beer, but I'm pretty close. I got Southern Tier, so it's going to be big. It's a Hazelnut Deluxe, which is their 10% Imperial Stout, and it does say the Anytime Treat on it. It calls itself the Anytime Treat. So,
listen, there's reference to treats that's spooky enough for me. So this is a hazelnut imperial stout. Is what you're saying?
Yeah, big old Nutella stout is what it's supposed to be. So yeah,
is it as sweet as that sounds?
Yes.
Yeah,
like it's sweet. It's sweet to the point that it's automatically giving me fucking acid reflux. Is really? Like, it's how sugary it is. Yes.
Yeah, I'm kind of, so I was looking out there because I was digging through some of the beers we had from last night, something left over. I was going to grab one of those Mexican chocolate stouts. So I was like, I don't think I could stomach that right now. And then I went for, because I figured, listen, pumpkin ale season is quickly coming to a close. I love me some pumpkin ales. I haven't talked about this one this year on the podcast, so I figured I'd give it a little go. But boy, howdy, is this thing sweet as well. I'm drinking Blockhouse pumpkin ale. Yeah, from the folks over at Pittsburgh Brewing Company. It smells great, and I like that it has some good body to it. It definitely is like, it reminds me a little bit of how speaking of Southern Tier, how Pumpkin smells, in that it's got the like ginger, nutmeg. It's not tremendously clovey if there's clove in there, but it's definitely got, just that kind of, pumpkin spice, warming, mulling spice type of thing. But then it's got a pretty pronounced vanilla type of note to it as well. But it drinks so sweet.
Yeah. That one is actually too sweet for me. Although, like, I can't speak to how it is since new ownership and everything. Yeah, I had a history with that beer because I had it when it first came out, and I don't think it was on as big a production schedule or anything, because like when it first came out, it was actually pretty dry and like drinkable, but it had all the spices and everything. But then like it kept getting sweeter and sweeter to the point that it just actually became like it's disgusting to me, and I was like, I'm never drinking this again. They can go fuck themselves.
It's definitely teetering on that ledge of like cloyingly sweet. And especially because, like I said, I'm a fan of, I know this is not exactly a craft selection in most people's eyes, but the Jacko, Sam Adams Jacko pumpkin ale is just one of the most drinkable pumpkin ales for me. And this is kind of the opposite, in that it's so sweet that it's teetering on, really hurting the drinkability. But I don't dislike it. It's just, it's definitely a little bit too sugary
Yeah.
For me.
Maybe they've edged it back in more recent years, but like I remember it just got to a point with, even with my, sweet tooth, I was like, no.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a little much in the sweetness. All right. Last thing, guys, we got to mention, for those of you who are new to the show, or maybe you're just tuning back in because it's spooky season, we got a Patreon, guys. You can go over to patreon.com/Halloween's Forever. And we got a Patreon account over there, and you can support the podcast with some paper monies. If you got them, you want to give them to us. Small amount, couple $2-3 a month. You get some stuff, and I'll let Steve tell you about it. But here, let me summarize the best I can. Do you like the Fast and the Furious movies like Steve? Do you hate the Fast and the Furious movies like me? Either way, we got you covered over on the Patreon.
Got your back.
Yeah.
So, if you sign up, we got a $3 tier. And on $3 tier, you get a couple 2-treat things. You get you get an extra vote in the polls when they come around. You get, like I mentioned earlier, I had a 31 days of horror recommendations, but like it doesn't go away. It stays up on the Patreon. You can read all 31 days now, you jerk off, even though
those words are there.
Yeah. I've written thousands of words. I wrote a 900-word essay on Slime City Massacre. Or a 600.
That's dedication. If you don't think that that's worth $3, fuck you.
Actually, it was a 900 essay on the Stenhall syndrome. It was a 600-word essay on Slime City Massacre. I don't want to misrepresent, and then it's false advertising. But it's like it's all up there.
Come on, it's there. It's there. Yeah. $3 gets it to you.
So you get all that, and that's fine. But if you give us $5, that's where you get the bread and butter. You can jump on the Discord, and you can see episodes happen live. You can participate. Yeah. You can talk about the movie with us as we talk about the movie. Sometimes we bring you up. You'll figure it out.
Yeah.
And then you also get the monthly podcast, Family is Forever.
Which is horrible. Not the podcast. The podcast is fun. The experience that I'm having to watch all the Fast and the Furious movies is horrible. Steve's suckered me into this. At first, it was kind of a joke. Then it turned into kind of a full-on gaslight situation. Now, I think it's a psyop, and it's really causing a lot of strife between me, myself, my brain, my family, the federal government, my Lord and Savior Satan, like all that. It's really straining my life and my relationships. Vin Diesel, Paul Walker, all these things are really kind of in flux right now, and it's causing me a lot of stress. But I'm doing it for yins out in podcast land and our patrons. So we are on, we just did the fourth one, which is called Fast and Furious. I know that's stupid. But we're just about to get into Fast 5, I believe, is the next one that we'll do in November. But the fourth installment came out here in October. The podcasts are a lot of fun. Like I said, I like recording them. We laugh. We have a good old time. But the movies make me want to drink bleach. So if you think that you want to listen to me slowly unravel psychologically while I discuss some of the dumbest movies ever made, and Steve laughs at me, give us $5 a month on the Patreon. It's super easy. It's super fun. You'll be supporting something that we like to do, and you'll be getting some extra stuff if you're a fan of the show. So
basically, the way people can think about it is it's like Brian's living his own Rosemary's Baby, where he's being a pharaoh and I'm John Cassavetes. And, he's being gaslit into believing that, the Fast and the Furious movies can't hurt him and they're good for him.
It's all in my head. The fact that I'm like my mortal fear of these movies is just in my head, and it's not something that's happening in the real world. But if you're interested, go over to patreon.com/Halloween is Forever. Just go to patreon.com, search Halloween is Forever, or go into our, one of our social medias, our Instagram, for example. Go to the link in the bio and you can get to our Patreon from there. All right. With all that nonsense and silliness out of the way, let's get down to the spooky ooky shit. Like I said, we're here to do a couple things. One of them is to please His Infernal Majesty. And I believe that this movie will do just that. So we are talking about from 2023, brand new, just released not that long ago, a little flick called When Evil Lurks. This is a Spanish production, I believe.
Argentinian.
Is it Argentinian? Yeah, I'm sorry. It's in Spanish, obviously, but it's Argentinian because yes, this is Demian Rugna or Rugna. I remember. Not sure about that last time.
You do the best you can.
I think it's Demian Rugna. Anyway, yes, because we talked about him already. I've actually talked about one of his movies in a Showdown episode way back, once upon a time, probably a couple years ago. A movie called Terrified, which I still suggest is one of the scarier movies that you can find out there. So he's responsible for that. And now he's also responsible for writing and directing. I think he wrote and directed that. And I believe he also wrote and directed this movie, When Evil Lurks.
Yes.
But he's got quite a not too far. It goes back quite a ways. He's been, it looks like his first kind of directorial, shorts for the first, few movies. I think his first feature length film came out in 2007, so he's been directing for a while, but not a ton of things. But the only ones I've not seen Satanic Hispanics. I imagine that sounds like it has a kind of a comedic element to it.
That one is actually it's an anthology that came out earlier this year, and it has
gotcha.
It also has as a director from VHS 85. The Gigi Sol Guerrero, she directed.
Oh, who did?
Yeah,
the one with the earthquake and all that.
Yeah, she also has a segment in Satanic Hispanics. So I haven't seen it yet, but I just know it was on my radar.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's popped up, and I haven't got around to watching it. But in any case, like I said, really liked Terrified, which is, believe it or not, 5 years old now. Pretty damn spooky. Spoiler alert. We'll talk about Terrified a little bit. I won't spoil anything in particular, just to suggest that it's a great flick that just drops the ball pretty hard in the ending, if I recall. But When Evil Lurks, we are going to spoil the living shit out of this movie. So just an FYI, if you haven't seen it yet and you care about that sort of thing, we are going to talk, heavy about plot points and that sort of stuff. So
yeah, my other possible warning for this film is also like Terrified. The director does not give a fuck about kids. And so if you haven't seen the movie yet, maybe continue listening, because there's some really extreme things with kids in peril. So if you're the kind of person who can't handle that, maybe you just want to listen to our episode about it, or maybe you want to get a kind of briefing about it, what you're about to see.
What to expect.
Yeah.
Because this movie is nasty. This is a mean, nasty movie.
This movie actually got a reaction out of me twice, which is uncommon.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too. Is this movie, like so right off the bat, I'll say I really enjoyed it. I thought it was extremely well done. I really like this movie. This is, when we talk about at the end of the year, our favorite horror movies of the year, this is undoubtedly going to be up there for me. I don't know where it'll fall, but this is undoubtedly going to be up there for me. I loved it. And as a jaded, and that we talked about, this is why a big reason why I love Terrifier 2 as well, is like I watch way too many horror movies. I have for decades and decades. So it takes a lot to like be unsettling for me. Mm-hmm. And I usually struggle. Like I don't necessarily gravitate towards the stuff where it's just like, oh, we're just going to take something vulnerable, like a kid or a puppy or something like that, and put it in peril. Usually that comes across as very cheap. And just kind of lazy to me, but like it's pulled off in this one to like really disturbing levels. So we'll talk about that. But quick side note, completely unrelated, but since I mentioned Terrifier, did you see that Terrifier 3 is going to be a Christmas horror movie? I'm very excited about this. Steve's not as excited about this. I can already tell. I love the Terrifier movies, and I love Christmas horror movies. I'm very excited that Terrifier 3 is going to be a Christmas horror movie.
Yeah, I knew as soon as I saw the poster, like, oh, Brian is going to be fucking over the moon about this. Mm-hmm. I didn't feel it. Like I just I thought the poster was funny because he's wearing Santa's face as a beard.
Yeah.
But I'm just like it has to have, he has to figure out how to write a fucking story for me to care. That's the thing.
No.
Yes.
It's just sloppy insanity. That's why. So here's why I like that movie. And it's similar to why I like this movie, although the story I think is great in this movie, and the Terrifier movie, you're not really there for the story necessarily.
Not at all.
I like I like movies that you cannot trust. We've talked about this on the podcast before many a times. If you're new to the show, I like something that's going to blindside me. I like something I'm just going to be walking down the street whistling, and then just get sucker punched in the ear. Like that's what I like. I like to be surprised. I hate to know what's going to happen. I hate to be right about what's going to happen in the plot. And that's hard because I've seen a lot of movies and I'm gullible. Steve's probably better at picking out, smaller plot points and putting the pieces together, Charlie Day style and knowing what's going to happen. Like I try to lose myself in the movies or whatever. I've just seen a lot of movies, so it's hard for me to be surprised.
Right.
Terrifier, specifically Terrifier 2, and When Evil Lurks are great examples where it's just like, you don't know what's going to happen and you cannot trust these movies. Like they will cold cock you when you're not paying attention. And this movie does it to, like I said, really, really great effect. Also, great tagline. There's no point in praying.
Yeah.
Great fucking tagline. Yeah. Come on. That just felt like a really awesome, 70s exploitation tagline. I loved it.
This movie, if you pay attention to it, it sets you up so early to you should not have high expectations for the way this ends. Yeah. Like this doesn't end happy. It sets you up. You should know. Yeah. But still, it still just leaves you like, oh God.
Yeah. Well, and Terrified, which is a tough title only because it's a really generic, crappy title, and it doesn't do the movie justice. The poster is not great either. It looks kind of, I don't know. It looks like it's going to be a Tubi original or something with the poster. And then also, since then, Terrifier, which we're talking about both simultaneously, so not to confuse people, but the Terrifier franchise with Art the Clown is an entirely, much better known, obviously, and also has absolutely nothing to do with it. So that even dilutes things more. But the movie from 2017 by the same writer-director, Demian Rugna, which Terrifier is Damian Leone. So it's two Damians, which makes it even more confusing. So Demian Rugna, who is the Argentinian director who did Terrified and When Evil Lurks, and then Damian Leone is the Terrifier, Art the Clown guy. Anyway, this movie, they're similar. They have similar sensibilities going back to Terrified and this, although set in very, very different places. I was really impressed by the fact that they made a very urban setting really creepy to me, because not a lot of movies pull that off well. It's easy to make rural settings creepy. Yeah. Because it's just barren and open and dark and, mysterious, and a lot of things can happen. But like urban settings, I feel like that's a little bit more impressive when they make that really, truly creepy. And they did a great job of that in Terrified. This goes the opposite direction. This is a very rural setting. This is middle of damn nowhere. Right.
Yeah. I mean, it does take a couple trips into the city, but most of it is all rural setting. And I like the way this movie starts too, because it's not a complete one for one, but it does just remind me of The Void. With the way The Void starts, it starts with them shooting that kid in the back and chasing the other kid down, and you're just thrown right into the action. And the same thing in this is you're just thrown in, the first thing you get is gunshots. Yeah. And so you're immediately thrown into some sort of action, and then you're following these two brothers investigating the gunshots.
Yeah. And there's a lot going on, world building wise and backstory and all that. There's a lot of things you have to get up to speed on relatively quickly in this movie. And I feel like they do a good job of doing that in a pretty graceful way. There's not some big nasty exposition dump. They do a couple that are borderline, but they make it seem natural. It's a character explaining it to a child, which, well, the kid doesn't understand, so we have to really lay it out for them. Like, it makes it felt, like I said, didn't feel rushed or anything. But
No.
yeah, like you said, Steve, we get that opening scene. You get these two guys, so they're brothers. It's Pedro and Jimmy, and they go out to find, like you said, they heard some shooting on their property in the middle of the night. They decide at dawn to go out and figure out what's going on. They live in this, basically on a middle of nowhere rural environment where it's just basically ranches. It feels like, right in the middle of nowhere, Argentina. They go out and they are, walk around the woods. Basically, they kind of remind me of the bodyguards from The Godfather a little bit.
Okay.
They got, like, one of them's kind of got the little cap on and they're walking around with shotguns. Anyway, but they're, in this rural setting or whatever, but they're walking around there. They find this torso, basically the bottom half of a torso. Someone got sliced right and dangled half, right at the waist. And they're pretty lax about it. They're pretty mellow about the whole thing. They're like, damn it, got a torso cut in half. So you kind of get the idea that these are like some kind of a little bit more rough and tumble guys, definitely.
I think it's because like they would be used to like hunting, so they're used to like dressing animals that they kill, or they're also used to butchering their own animals living on a farm. So like the actual gore doesn't bother them, but just the context of like, why is there half a person here is like fucking with them.
Right. And also you come to learn later why maybe this is not that surprising that wild stuff is happening because of kind of the state of the world at this point, which you don't know yet. So they also find a bunch of like weird instruments around the body parts, a map, and then a bunch of other documents basically that lead them to, a small kind of shack where they know this particular person that lives there, this older woman. Her name's Maria. And she has two sons. And you're kind of lost. You're thrust into this as the audience. And apparently Maria was waiting for the guy who was cut in half to come and kind of deal with, and what she literally says is her son Uriel is to kill him. They were waiting for him to come kill her son Uriel. And then you get in the back room and Uriel ain't doing great. No, he ain't doing so hot.
He's looking a lot like the sloth from Seven. It ain't great.
He's very like bloated and covered in all these wild growths, almost a little Slither-ish in terms of the way he's like almost mutated. He's got these big growths and he's very deformed, super gross, great practical effects. And everything is just like oozing pus. Like every time you touch him or move him, something just kind of like pus comes out of somewhere. It's super gross.
Yeah, he's dribbling and drooling green stuff at every time, and like he has he's in his like tighty whities and they're all like piss and poop stained and everything.
Oh
he's just
and they're
terrible.
Just talking about how much it smells, and it's just a real grimy scene. And you're confused because you almost think that Pedro is a little bit of a loose cannon. He's a little bit wacky. He doesn't think things through real great. And then you got Jimmy, his brother, who's a little bit of the more reserved brother a little bit. And Jimmy and Pedro, or specifically Pedro, seem to be very upset with Maria and her other son, and basically saying like, you think that they're like, well, why didn't you get him help? Like, you've been letting him sit here and suffer for the longest time. Like, that's kind of what you're like, at least what I was thinking as a, someone being thrust into the situation. But you start to realize that they're more mad at the system because essentially what has happened is there is possessions that are happening just out in the world. Like, demon possession is part of is a reality of this world, and it is almost basically what they did as the writer did here is telling a story about demon possession, but giving it some of the tenets and tropes and even rules as like a zombie apocalypse or an infection type of virus movie.
Right. Yeah.
But instead of a virus movie, a zombie infection, some sort of freaking T-virus situation, it's a demon that jumps from body to body. But there are a bunch of weird like biological rules that play into this as well, which you start to learn.
Yeah, it's like a mix of, like you're saying, it's like a mix of like zombies or just a general pandemic. And the movie Fallen with Denzel Washington, where like the demon is able to just jump body to body. So like, it has those rules in it. And also like,
it's a Jason Goes to Hell situation.
Jason Goes to Hell. But like, as it goes on and as the demon takes control of people, it kind of reminded me of The Happening.
Oh my God. I thought that too. It's really interesting that you say that because they, I remember thinking this feels a little bit like M. Night Shyamalan, but like someone is directing it. Like, right. I don't mean to say like I like some of his movies and actually probably like them more than some other people, but like, yeah, it does feel like somebody is just, it's a better directed version of some of his most memorable scenes. Yeah,
it was because it was like The Happening with like a good story and like a good world built around it.
Yeah, because we learn pretty early on that one of the things that happens when the possession like takes hold, or one incarnation of the a possession takes hold, is it often causes people to commit suicide. And obviously hurt and kill and, other people and do all types of awful shit. It's
suicide, it's murder, it's all of it. But the suicides that happen just feel, again, very much like The Happening.
Because they're very abrupt and they're very like the least convenient way, kind of thing. And obviously very brutal. And also, I guess, too, the wide lingering shots feel very M. Night Shyamalan-y as well.
Yeah. And also, like, because a lot of it also happens in the daytime.
That's true, too.
Which is similar for The Happening. Like, so much of that movie is in the daytime because that is part of the horror of like bad things don't happen during the day. It's noon. Everybody's getting a croissant at Starbucks. Surely I'm not going to axe myself in the face.
Well, here's the great thing about this too. No Mark Wahlberg. This is literally 0.0 Mark Wahlberg. Zero, which is a big plus for me.
You want to keep Mark Wahlberg out of your movie? Speak a different language.
That's 100% true. Yeah. He said, if you don't like it, you can get out. That's a quote from Mark Wahlberg himself. Mark Wahlberg, maybe the only actor I hate more than Mark Wahlberg is Paul Walker. Right. Which if you want to hear me rant about that, we can do that on the Patreon. Anyway, so like I said, a lot of these apparent demonic possessions are happening all over, and they have been happening. You don't know how long, but it's something that is quite widespread, and it's not even like a superstition thing. Like, most possession movies, you have to convince somebody or multiple people that the possession is real. That's like a big hallmark, a trope of possession movies. With this, you don't. It is more the disbelief around whether or not it's a possession, an actual demon possession, is not that demon possessions don't exist. In fact, that's very much established that they do in these movies. It's just they have been, up until this point, at least in this area, it's been mostly reserved to more urban settings. So they're all kind of like, wait, there's a possession out here, like out in the sticks, like we thought we were safe out here in the sticks, kind of thing. So
because it seems like even though they do happen in the urban settings, they're still rare to that point, but it's just they've happened enough that everybody is aware of them, even the system is aware of it. Because like we were talking about, we already have had talks about, what a cleaner is. And then Pedro and Jimmy's next move is to go to the police and try to report it to the police because the police know about it. But also they're not. One of the things I noticed in the police station while they're doing the report is there's a crucifix on the wall up behind them. And so it feels like maybe as part of the power structure, they still kind of believe in the church, even though we're told later on, like, churches have fallen, everybody believes God is dead, except for maybe the government.
It's really bizarre because, I mean, so getting back to where this ties in, with Uriel, they basically say, why haven't you taken care of this? And you're like, what does that mean? Why don't you just shoot this weird, demonic person or whatever, or possessed person? And what you come to realize through, again, small kind of context clues at first, but then flat out, they basically say is there are kind of like government sanctioned cleaners, which are essentially government sanctioned exorcists, essentially, who come out and deal with it in a way where the demon possession, plague, if you will, doesn't spread. So they can kind of isolate it and kill the person in a way that doesn't make the demon be able to jump from body to body, because as soon as it's killed, it can immediately jump from body to body if it's not disposed of in like the proper way. So Maria and her family had apparently notified the mayor and like the local, whatever deputy or whatever sheriff, on whoever it is, a year before, and they had done nothing. And they were finally going to do something. They sent the cleaner on their way. And of course, we come to learn pretty quickly that the torso that they found in the woods was that of the cleaner that was coming to deal with Ariel. And something got to the cleaner and killed him, basically intercepted him en route. Right. Yeah. So, there's this power struggle thing where, like you said, which was interesting that at this point, and we come to learn later on that it has been at least like 12 years since these things have been happening, that now people think that God is dead and the churches have all basically just went away, which in reality, I feel like the complete opposite would happen. If all of a sudden we knew demon possession was real, all of a sudden you have a lot more people being super over the top religious pretty quickly.
Yeah. I feel like it would swing that way, but also, I mean, it feels like we're jumping a little forward ahead, but it's like,
we are.
You learn that the people who were, at first witnessing the possessions couldn't do anything about it. So like if everybody couldn't do anything about it, then maybe you would, like if the Catholics couldn't solve possessions, nobody would be Catholic. And they would try to find a different way. And then it's kind of what I like about this movie. And maybe I hope there's another one that expands on this, because there is just like a big world that we don't see. But like you get explained that like some people do come along and have an answer, but you never really see those people at all.
Well, and they also feel like you don't see them. I mean, I guess you meet one. And she has some expertise in this area.
She was actually trained by them. The people I'm talking about, she was trained by them.
Oh, you're talking about the monks. Yes.
Yeah.
Right. They allude to them.
Yeah. But like you don't ever meet those monks. You just meet the people they trained, which is these half legs and a lady is all you get.
That's true. And and they're, I guess, getting back to the whole like religion going away thing, I guess they do suggest that these people who were the only people who did prove to be able to handle the possessions were some sort of like, it almost felt like it was some sort of like ancient, potentially pagan or old religion mystics type of thing. Like they weren't like Christians or something like that. There was like an old, like some sort of old, mystic, magician type of, rituals that were actually proven to be effective against these demonic possessions. And maybe that contributed to why people were like, God's dead or whatever. So, but anyway, we don't actually get that deep into that, and it doesn't surprisingly play into the story that much. But I would be really interested, which I would be very surprised to see that a movie like this got a sequel. I kind of hope it doesn't, but if it did, or if there was like, like if this was the type of thing that there was a deeper, a manga or something about it, like it would be really fun to get into all that stuff.
Yeah. He just, the director sets up a lot of wonderful lore that you want to know more about. So like if there was a sequel to this film, I wouldn't want it with any of the characters we see in this film. I just want it more as an anthology, as like, okay, give me some other aspect of the world. Show me like what Buenos Aires is up to now that it's been infected, multiple times.
Yep. Anyway, so we do get introduced to another person who I don't know the exact relationship between Pedro and Jimmy and this gentleman. His name's Ruiz. I got the feeling that like So Ruiz is like a local, like wealthy landowner, right?
Mhm.
He owns a huge amount of land. I don't know exactly if he owns the land that Pedro and Jimmy live on. It feels like he has some sort of influence over them, but I don't know.
No, I don't think it's that he owned the land. It's just like because he's wealthy and his land butts up against theirs as well as Maria's, and like Pedro and Jimmy aren't rich. Like they're all right. I know. And then Maria is poor as hell. Like, Ruiz just hates having to deal with like these poverty people butting up against his land is all he did.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense. It's never explicitly said, but it does feel like they are kind of bothers to him. And he's like, he's this wealthy landowner. He has like, he's got like a fancy house and all this sort of thing. And he also has had some conflicts, with the local government as well, because he just kind of, thinks he runs the show and is like, well, fuck these government officials. They can't do anything kind of thing. So there seems to be some headbutting there as well. So the possession, like I said, is this, there are different elements of the possession, which we come to learn. And like I said, this Uriel, who is like this crazy, like just swelled up, like monstrously infected, almost is reminiscent of some sort of like T virus type of thing, is the only incarnation we know at this point. And Ruiz is basically like, we're starting to learn at this point slowly that this is something that is happening at other areas of the world, and that they're just really terrified that it has come to their little corner of the world. And Ruiz is like, basically he's sitting there, at dinner with his pregnant wife. And you kind of get the feeling that like Ruiz is kind of a scumbag too. Like I get, not to pass judgment, but it looks like his wife's about 40 years younger than him. Yeah. And like, he's just this like old slimy rich guy. And he's got this like, kind of, his pregnant wife at home, and he's like really being weird and distant during dinner. And then all of a sudden he's just like, fuck this, I'm gonna, he jumps up and she's like, don't do anything stupid, blah, blah, he like grabs his gun, goes to Maria's house, just like busts in the door, and is basically going to shoot Uriel. And the family, Maria and the other son, are like, don't do it, don't what's gonna happen. If you don't deal with the possessed people correctly, meaning you just shoot him in the head, for example, that it'll spread. And he knows it'll spread. Ruiz knows it'll spread, but Ruiz is just like kind of a hothead and is like panicking, and is, he's got a kid on the way, and he's like, oh, this possession weird shit that spreads is like coming to our town. So basically eventually Ruiz decides like, I'm not going to do it. And even Uriel, who's like, the demon is speaking through him, is like, basically kill me, because he wants everyone to kill him so he could jump to another body. And he's saying, hey, if you kill me, I won't go, basically infect your unborn child kind of thing. And Ruiz is like, fuck, I can't, this is the wrong thing to do. So he just goes out and basically locks himself in his truck and throws a little temper tantrum for a while until the morning comes. And then they show up.
Pedro and Jimmy show up.
Pedro and Jimmy. And then there's another woman as well, if I'm not mistaken, wasn't it? Or no, it was his wife.
It's just his wife shows up to like get him out of the truck. Yeah,
he's still in the truck in the morning outside Maria's house. And they're like, what are you doing? And they think he already killed Uriel. They go inside. He hasn't. So they're like, oh, it's not too late. But he basically bullies everyone, even though you can tell they all know it's a bad idea, that they are going to move Uriel because the government isn't going to help. No cleaner's going to come, and they're going to drag his big leaking ass out of the house and just get him in the truck and drive. They're like, we'll drive hundreds of miles away and just dump him somewhere and get him out of our town kind of thing. And so they do that, and it's, like I said, it's gross. They're moving him around. He's just leaking everywhere, pussing all over the place and shit. Yeah. They eventually get him in the bed of the truck, and they're driving, and they suggest they've driven like 300 kilometers. Like they drove for hours, right? Yeah. In one direction. And then all of a sudden, they're like, okay, should we drive further? They're like, yeah, let's drive, another 100 kilometers or whatever. And they're not paying attention. They almost hit a kid who's riding his bike on the road. Assumedly he's on his way to school. and they almost run him over. But they don't. And they eventually pull over somewhere to dump Uriel, on the side of the road. And they see that he's not there. He's out of the truck. And apparently he had, rolled out or something, they assume, when they almost hit the kid. But you're not really sure, because he had like a cover over the bed of the truck as well. So you're like not 100% sure what happened. Did the bed pop open, or the tailgate pop open? You're not really sure what, but apparently he did get out. And they're like, well, it must have happened when we almost ran that kid over. And they're like, well, fuck it, it's their problem now, basically. they just go, well, we're not dealing with this anymore.
It's everybody else's, like, we got him far enough away from us that we think it's going to be okay. And whatever. And then they just say fuck off and they go back home. And then like Ruiz just dumps the two brothers off like on the edge of their property somewhere. He's like, walk home, fuck off. Get
out. He's a real prick. And also, like, they basically pull like a Monty Burns, you know what I mean? They just dump the toxic waste in the pond. They're like, that's somebody else's problem now, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So they all go home and just say fuck it. They're all kind of, weird things are kind of happening, a little spooky shit happening. But is it nerves? What's going on around the house with Pedro and Jimmy? Ultimately, the next day, they hear Ruiz is in his house, hears his wife screaming. They go outside. And he's got a whole bunch of goats. And there is one of the goats, a black goat, classic demon goat situation, that's just staring at them. And they're like, well, that's the possessed goat. And she's screaming, what the hell's going on? Blah, blah, blah. And Ruiz panics like a dumbass. And he decides he gets a shotgun and runs out. And he's pointing his shotgun right at the goat. And the goat and him are having an old fashioned, stare down. And the wife is going like, don't shoot it. If you shoot it, you can't use a firearm against it because what'll happen. And she's like, no, you have to get an axe. So she runs to get the axe. As he's pointing the shotgun, kind of like I said, they're having the stare down. The goat like walks up and presses the gun right against its head, which is like a baller ass goat move.
It's such a John McClane fucking move out of the goat. It's just like,
it's the Bruce Willis of goats.
Yeah. Make my day.
You shut your goddamn mouth. Anyway, so he literally presses, and then it like does a goat bleat. You're allowed, and startles Ruiz and makes him shoot it in the head. And as the wife is running back with the axe is when, he shoots the goat, and he kind of means to, he kind of doesn't, like he got startled. And then as soon as he shoots the goat in the head, the wife just axes him, just does him in with the axe right in the face. And then as soon as she does that, she kneels down and starts axing herself in the face. So this is the happening-ish scene, because this is in broad daylight. It's like late morning in like a wide open sunny field, not sunny, but like overcast field. And she's just slowly axing herself in the face while he's laying there already dead. And there's a bloody goat and all this stuff. So essentially this goat is where the demon had got into this goat. And, you learn that it's kind of like animals are very susceptible to it. So it uses animals as vessels. And then if it can jump from an animal to a person, it will do that pretty readily. So it jumped it to her, and then she axed herself. And now the demon is just, free range demon at this point. It's just floating around.
Yeah. There's also a rule about like, they've said it multiple times already, but like there's a rule about not using firearms. And so I imagine it's something to do with like the gunpowder going off.
Yeah.
It, for whatever reason, it can travel through the gunpowder as well, like the residue that's in the air, like whether it's the fire or something,
more readily. And you learn that there's actually these, pretty quickly we learn about these more like established like 7 rules of dealing with these demons. And one of them is you cannot, like, you don't use a firearm. That's like almost rule 1. If you use a firearm, it's really going to fuck shit up.
Yeah. I think it immediately just jumped. I'm wondering, I didn't think about it because this scene, I didn't think about it much when it happened, right? Maybe the reason why his wife hit him with the axe is because he was going to be possessed. Because if you kill something with the firearm, it possesses you. Like, you're the person who gets possessed. But she kills him with the axe, but it still isn't enough because she's the one that gets possessed. So she doesn't kill him out of possession. She kills him just to prevent possession.
Yeah, that's what I thought. And then she kills herself. And I'm like, well, she was possessed. So how do we know she didn't just kill him because she was possessed?
Yeah. But I think it's because it's the rule of not using the firearm, but it just didn't matter because she was in proximity. Yeah. She still gets possessed and axes herself.
Yeah, it's a real bang bang play there. You're not really sure who, what happens and why it happens, but everyone gets killed pretty quick on their at their house. So cut first, and then Uriel's little brother. I didn't write his name down, and it's not tremendously important, but Uriel's little brother shows up at Pedro and Jimmy's place, and basically tells them what happened to Ruiz. And then he, I guess it's important to say because it comes back later, is he's like, here's what happened with Ruiz, blah, blah, blah. And they're like, fuck, it's here. It made its way back. We're all in danger. And, also they basically say to Uriel's little brother, like, all right, well, get the fuck out of here, basically. And they take his gun because they ask if he has a gun, and they take it because he said basically, I traveled the way out here. It's freezing cold. I'm freezing. I can't go back home. Can I stay here? And they're like, no, you can stay in the barn, basically. And he's like, oh, cool, guys, thanks. And he goes out and stays in the barn. And they're like, and leave in the morning and never come back and fuck you.
Right.
And they
don't
say,
let us see your dirty little kid face here anymore.
Yeah, they're kind of a dick to this poor kid. But they're like, so we're going to fuck off in the morning. We're going to leave. But first, what we're going to do is we're going to go into town, and Pedro's like, we're going to get my kids. We're going to get our mom, and we're going to fuck off, hundreds of miles away, somewhere else, and run away from this situation. So in the morning, they go to Pedro's old house, and you learn pretty quickly, this guy opens the door, and Pedro's kind of like, open the door, dickhead. And he's like, no, you're not supposed to be here, whatever. It's Pedro's ex-wife's new husband. His name's Leo. And his wife is Sabrina. And, Pedro is kind of playing the role of like the deadbeat dad. You don't really know at this point what happened that caused him to be estranged from his family. And obviously he's now divorced, and his wife has a new husband, and they live in town. They got this nice house and all this stuff. But he's like, hey, I'm going to come get the kids. And he just basically barges in. He's like, hey, dickweeds. We got to get our stuff. It kind of was reminiscent of Shaun of the Dead a little bit to me, where he's like, all right, come on, we got to get our shit. We got to go kind of thing. And they're basically like, no, asshole. And they're kind of used to Pedro acting kind of erratic a little bit. So they certainly don't they don't trust him. And, he's like, I got to burn all my clothes. So as soon as he comes in the house, he's telling Leo, like, hey, dickhead, go get the kids, get all their stuff, get them a change of clothes, get them like, some whatever you need to bring. And we got to go. We got to get out of town. We're all leaving together. And they're like, no, we're not doing this. And he's meanwhile stripping all his clothes off. So then, like, when his ex-wife walks in with, which is, you learn is not his daughter. There's 3 kids in the house. He has 2 sons from he and Sabrina's marriage. And then Sabrina and Leo have a daughter that is not, doesn't belong to, this was from after they were married, from after Pedro and Sabrina were divorced. So, she walks in with the daughter, and he's standing there butt naked. She's like, what the fuck? So he's looking very erratic and untrustworthy. And he's like, there's a possession, it's here. We got to get the fuck out of here. And she's basically like, why can't you just like let me be? Like, what did I do to deserve this? And blah, 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 all this stuff. So a lot of stuff's getting pulled up from their relationship. And they're arguing, and Leo is kind of like wanting to give him the benefit of the doubt a little bit at first, and Sabrina's like, no, call the police, let's go. Meanwhile, the one son, the younger son, who seems to be, I'm going to say like 6 or 7, is like, hey, Dad. And he's like, yeah, get your shit. We're going. And then the daughter, who probably is like, I don't know, 4 or 5, who's not his kid, but Leo and Sabrina's kid. And then he has an older son who I'm going to say is like, 16, maybe.
Yeah, he's in his teens.
And he is like severely autistic, like nonverbal, special needs.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's like, get everybody, we got to fucking go. And as they're doing all this arguing and the whole thing is kind of coming to a head, and they go outside and burn his clothes. He's like, you got to guys get me some more clothes. His dog, and I don't know if it was his dog from when they were still together, but there's this big ass dog. It looks like some sort of like mastiff, bull mastiff looking thing. It's a big ass looking dog. And it's kind of walking around and you're getting Thing vibes because the dog is sniffing him. He's petting the dog. The dog is sniffing his clothes. He's needs to get his clothes off and burn them. So this is where things are a little bit sketchy because it's this whole, like, it really is like a virus in certain instances. And the dog, they keep showing the dog like sniffing them and then the dog sniffing the kids and licking the kids. And you're just like, fuck, something's going on with this dog.
Yeah.
But then it really, to me, felt like it was going to be a little bit of a red herring.
Oh,
like,
no,
they
not
were just,
for me.
For me, I thought it was going to be like you just want us to pay attention to the dog, and then something else was going to happen. But in any way,
it wasn't that way for me because I mean, just the editing was too intentional, but like
it was very intentional, but
it's just the scene was, and this happens throughout the movie, which is one of the things I really like about the movie is he uses kind of this cacophony of panic to like raise tension. So like people are just constantly speaking over each other. Like people are yelling at each other.
Yeah.
It comes into play with the autistic son where like he's nonverbal, but he has like a series of grunts that he'll like grunts and moans. And like, so like he'll get into this rhythmic moaning that just like, it just builds and builds and it's like layers of fucking noise. And it like, it starts to drive you crazy, but also, something is about to happen. And
there's a lot of tension building around it. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's what happens in this scene is like, there's just so much fucking noise, but then it's doing these intentional cuts to rather serene interactions between the dog and the little daughter. And I was just like, oh, just fucking do it already. Just pull the trigger, you son of a bitch.
Well, and I thought that's what was going to happen. And like, you knew something was going to happen with the dog, but here's how I took it. And I had just rewatched the Halloween, 2018 Halloween movie the other night. And there's this scene I remember because when it first came out, Kate and I were watching it in the theaters, and it's that probably the most iconic scene in the movie where like you're following Michael from behind and he goes back down the alleyway, ends up going through someone's back door, murders someone in their kitchen, that sort of thing. It's almost a remake of the scene from part 2 a little bit. But it's different. And obviously it's updated and all that. Anyway, during that part, he walks into a room at one point. He had just killed this woman with a hammer, and you hear a baby crying. And you see Michael like walking up, and you're facing from behind him, but you really can't see which direction he's going because he's turning right, left through this house. And you see him walking towards a crib, and he kind of does like a quick little look at the crib. And I remember Kate in the theater going like, "Oh my God, he better not kill the baby. He can't. There's no fun." And being a fan of the Halloween franchise, like I knew he wasn't going to kill the baby. Right. That's just not a Michael Myers thing to do, and that wasn't going to happen in this movie. But I thought it was a little bit like that. Like I thought it was that thing where like we're going to add even more tension because we got this little kid, and this big scary looking dog, this big, like I said, this dog had to be 140 pounds, it was a massive dog. But anyway, right as you're saying, the big argument, all this cacophony of arguments and speaking over and screaming is happening. And then right without warning, this big ass the dog just chomps the kid. The little girl
just right in the head.
Her.
Just puts the entire head in his,
and it happens so quick and it's brutal because then you get like the dog dragging the kid under the table and just shaking the kid like a toy.
Yeah.
And it's just brutal. Yeah,
because the middle son sees it happen.
Yes.
And then he looks under the table and the dog is just shaking the girl underneath the table. And then he goes off screaming to get, everybody else to like, hey, the dog's
pay
attacking.
attention to what's happening. Yeah. And then Leo goes over and he sees that the dog's got the girl, and the dog runs outside, just literally carrying this child like a chew toy, runs outside. And like I said, so this daughter, the kid who got munched, was Leo and Sabrina's kid, not Pedro's. Mm-hmm. So shit has now fully hit the fan. Everyone's panicking, screaming, running, trying to figure out what's going on. Pedro's like trying to get out of there, and he's not really that worried about going and finding this kid.
No,
he's like,
it's not his kid.
The demons. Yeah, he's like, the demon's here. Possession's happening here. I got to get my kids and get the fuck up out of here. I don't really care about this. And Leo's like, no, obviously we got to go find this kid. It's his kid. And Sabrina's like, oh my God, what happened? They're just absolutely in just panic mode. And he's telling Leo, don't shoot the dog, because Leo goes and grabs a gun and runs out after the dog. He's like, don't shoot the dog. Whatever you do, don't shoot the dog. And Leo's not paying attention. He's hysterical. And meanwhile, he runs out. He's kind of he's running around helping them look. There's kind of a little bit of panic happening in the neighborhood. The neighbors are coming out. What's happening? And he stumbles upon Leo, and Leo has shot the dog.
Yeah.
And he's like, fuck, So now the thing has clearly jumped into Leo. He knows this. He's assuming this is what happened. And meanwhile, the little girl who got munched is back at the house, and she's like, okay.
Yeah, not a scratch on her.
Not a scratch on her. And the mom, Sabrina, is clearly like so relieved but confused and hysterical still. So the kid, the Scooby Snack kid, her name's Vicky. I just had her listed as Scooby Snack for a while on here. But Vicky is her name. Tells the mom, because she's now creepy possessed Vicky, she's like, Daddy's going to come home and kill us. And she's like, Daddy, boom, come back, boom. And Sabrina's like, what? Why is this happening? What are you saying?
What are you saying now? Yeah.
And you think she's talking about Pedro for a minute, but it's actually Leo, because that's her dad. And then as she's saying that, she's like, the mom's, Sabrina's on her knees with the kid, and Leo just comes with the truck and just mashes them both into the house, basically.
Yeah, which is like another happening, like, because it just comes out of nowhere. Because she's telling Sabrina, like, Daddy gonna come home, boom, and like this is intercut with Pedro basically like stealing away with Sabrina's car and her two sons.
Right.
So it's like, oh, is she predicting something way in the future? Like Pedro's going to come back. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Is what you think.
You think way down the road.
Yeah. But no, it's Leo right around the corner in his fucking shitty Toyota or whatever, and just plows them both in. Yeah. Just plows them both into the house. And it's like, Jesus fucking Christ.
Yeah. That happened pretty abruptly. So now they Pedro is up the F out of there. And he sees all that happen, and everyone is like, the neighbors are kind of gathering around and whatever, and Leo's in there and he's all gooned up, and Pedro's like, fuck this noise. Pedro grabs Sabrina's car, puts his kids in there, and he's out. Right. So they go back to pick up Jimmy and their mother, Jimmy and Pedro's mother. Mm-hmm. And this is where we get the bigger explanation, and it's their mom in the back of the car with Santino, who is the younger son, and then I think the older son, the autistic teenager's name's, is it Jair?
Jair.
Jair. Okay.
Yeah, Jair. So Jair.
Yeah, Jair and Santino are the two sons, and she's explaining to Santino basically the whole thing about the possession, because they're talking about it and the kids keeps going like, what are you talking about? What's that mean? And the grandma explains everything about possession to the kid, also us. And basically, like I said, this is where we establish it's been happening for quite some time, and it's widely known and understood, but until now it's mostly been focused on cities. And there's like 7 rules which some of the rules, at least for me, the subtitles, so this is all in Spanish, so the subtitles like kind of made it, at least a couple of the rules for me not entirely clear, but one of them is no electric lights. Like when you're dealing with a possessed person or possessed, whatever person, entity, no electric lights because they absorb that or something bad happens when you use electric lights.
I took it as, so like with the electric lights and the gun usage.
Yeah.
I took them both as like things that are related to like man-made, like anything that was like created by men is kind of like has a conductivity to it that draws
they can
demons
use it
to it.
Right, and they can at the very least use it to their advantage. It feels like because the demons are very much into emotionally manipulating people. Like that's their main MO, right? She also says stay away from animals, which I think what, basically that means is we know now that animals can be kind of a conduit, a very easy, they're very susceptible to the demon using it as a vessel. And then the one that the translation didn't really make a lot of sense. It sounded like don't take anything that is a personal possession of something of someone who is possessed. Like an item can also create, there is some sort of danger involved with that. Yeah.
So, and we learn a little bit more about this, but it's all about, you have to give up basically everything because the demon's going to try to use your past against you in any way it can. And so I think if you have a piece of something from a loved one, you're going to look at it and remember them. And then maybe that loved one is going to be able to find you as a possessed.
And the only way you can stand up to these entities is just to like basically have nothing to lose or just kind of abandon all hope or fear or, any feelings towards anything. Kind of, I guess. Yeah. Which is kind of explained a little bit later, but, and then it talks about, basically it says don't kill them basically. Right. Cause then they can jump from body to body. Don't use its name. So don't say like Satan, or Lucifer or whatever. Don't like give it a name basically. And then obviously don't shoot them because the gun thing we talked about. And then there's one more, which we don't know yet. And grandma's like, oh yeah, that was only 6. And grandma's like, was it? I'm a grandma. And they don't really get into what the 7th one is, but like later you kind of get explained to it that you can't care about anything. You can't be afraid of death. You can't be afraid of anyone else dying because they'll just use that to your advantage. And it kind of like it preys on your fear, right? In a lot of ways. Yeah. But those are kind of the rules that we get about it. The other thing that I thought did a really great job, because you're not just running from a demon in this instance, like there's a lot of logistical challenges that they also have that they're like dealing with. One is they just left abruptly, and they also are like, you get the idea, like relatively poor, so no one has any money. Right. So they literally don't have money for gas. Like they're also dealing with the autistic son who's got like I said, these, special needs. So it's like, for example, at one point to get him to move, to like get in the car, he had to promise him this like apple ice cream that he eats. Yeah. And they couldn't find the apple ice cream. So they went to like a gas station, and he didn't really have any money anyway, like for anything else. And he got him an ice cream, but it wasn't the apple ice cream. So he wouldn't eat it. And he was like, he was not responding well. And then also like later on, like the kid, needs help going to the bathroom. So you get the idea he has like a diaper. They have to change his diaper, so there's a lot weighing on them at this point. So it's not just like we can jump in the car and leave, there's a lot of other stuff going on.
And then like in that scene where like they're stopped to get the ice cream and gas, this is another scene where like all that cacophony and tension is building up because the autistic son is making a lot of groans. The young son wants to go home. the Jimmy and Pedro and the mother are arguing about money. And so like it's a lot of building. And then it's cut with the mom's telephone going off because the demon has essentially located them at this point from all the kind of fear and upset, feelings everybody's feeling at that moment. They get a call from Sabrina, who we know is dead, and Pedro knows is dead. And of course the kid wants to let me talk to mom.
Right. Yeah. Which so there's so it's all creating this high amount of and you feel the desperation that Pedro was feeling in that moment too. Yeah. And it winds
the demon's taunting him over the phone. He just winds up smashing the phone on the ground and breaking down and crying and just, it's like, Jesus,
Yeah. And the demon is trying to get him to basically just give up, Right. And the demon is, of course, it's Sabrina talking to him on the phone is I'm coming to get my kids and fuck you and you're a piece of shit. And and she goes on to explain, this is why I, cheated on you. This is why I was, banging everyone, is because you're a piece of shit and you're not, you suck. You're lame. Fuck you. You're
not a good husband or a father or any of that. And now I'm going to come and get my kids.
And it was preying on his guilt regarding, him being essentially an absentee dad to his kids, especially a special needs kid. It's you didn't want to be his dad. You know what I mean? And also even saying really dark shit about suggesting that he was responsible for his the kid's disability too. It was just it was super going for the jugular as a demon is wont to do, right?
And that's classic possession stuff, I've watched a bunch of possession movies in the past month or so, and most of them are so fucking boring because they don't do anything new. And this one does a whole lot new, but also it is nice to see kind of the classic things still hold up as well.
Right. This is the your mother sucks cocks in hell part of the movie.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, this is still okay, but they do plenty enough new in this film that's oh, yes, it's so refreshing that we're not just relying on the same fucking bullshit over and over again of a kid tied to a bed doing fucking monster voice,
Yeah. Well, and this one too, there's a lot hinted at. And even in some instances explicitly said or not, maybe not explicitly, but very heavily suggested of all these weird undertones and secrets and things that are happening between the main characters. So you get a lot of character building that is very indirect without a guy going, well, I'm scared of this, and maybe this might have happened between us. You get it through other means. So at this point you get him, learning that, Sabrina was, cheated on Pedro, and that's ultimately what made him kind of pull away and just kind of like I said, stop being it sounds like he had a restraining or things got messy between them, but that was why, right? And then now this other character we get introduced to, Jimmy's Pedro's on dire straits here. I don't know what to do. I'm kind of just broke down, just weeping on the side of the road, and Jimmy is I have someone who I think might be able to help us. She might be able to lend us some money, and she can help us. So it takes her to this woman's house. Her name is Mirta, and she has some knowledge of the possessed. And also Jimmy, this was the thing I was alluding to. Jimmy had, it's not heavily suggested. It's all but flat out said that Jimmy had some sort of romantic relationship with her when he was younger, and she's about 30, at least 30 years older than him. Yeah. And the suggestion was she was his teacher and he was a student when he was an adolescent, and they had an affair when she was a middle-aged teacher and he was the student. Yeah. And you get the idea, because he even kind of says oh, you're such a lovebird and blah, blah, blah. You get the idea that Jimmy had a habit of banging his teachers when he was a kid. This is heavily suggested, and that Jimmy kind of gets around. Jimmy is, Jimmy just kind of, Jimmy's out there Jimmying, what I mean? Left and right.
Yeah. So, Jimmy's been a gadabout for most of his life.
he's a gadabout. I would say Jimmy be Jimmying, but you get the idea, right? That's what Jimmy be doing.
Yeah, I guess I missed I maybe missed a line or two in the subtitle. Like I just wasn't like I got that she was his teacher at some point. I just didn't know like at what age, and if it was like a grooming situation or if it was just like a horny young boy.
It sounded like it was like a teenager. Like I took the idea because it kind of suggested that like Jimmy would go away to boarding school, and because Pedro, there was some line. I'm completely paraphrasing this, but it was something like Jimmy, come home and the first thing you would always say is how you miss the teachers or whatever when you come home for summer, like from boarding school. So I get the idea he was like a teenager and he was, banging his middle-aged teachers, which is like to happen. It was a thing that Jimmy did. Like it was, and listen, teenager and, shame on the teachers, there it's obviously the child is the victim, but at the same time, he kind of was like, Pedro was like, no, that was Jimmy's move.
Yeah,
like, that's kind of what he suggested. That was Jimmy's whole deal.
Other people were into Pokemon cards and Beyblades, and Jimmy was into just smashing older ladies,
porking all his teachers. yeah. It was pretty. It was a real spring autumn scenario there. But anyway, so Pedro. So they all stay at Mirta's house. So the kids are inside. Jimmy's inside. They're sleeping around the house. The one, Santino, which I just can't, such a funny name for a little kid. I don't know why. Yeah. Santino just sounds like an extra from like, it's like, it's, one of the just like nameless faces in the back of Goodfellas. That's Santino over there.
Right. Yeah.
Or no, wasn't Santino, wasn't that the sister's, husband that they kill in Godfather? Was his name Santino? Oh. Or no, Santino was the brother. Wasn't Santino the brother? Santino, the James Caan. Was his name Santino?
No, James Caan wasn't the brother either. James Caan was the consigliere.
No, he wasn't. That was Tom.
Yes, he was. Yeah. James Caan was Tom.
Wait, who was the brother? Who was the hothead brother?
I'm gonna look it up now.
I know this is completely off. Yeah, James Caan is Sonny Corleone, the hothead
Sonny
brother.
Corleone. Who was Tom then?
Tom was oh God, what's the actor's name?
Oh, Robert Duvall.
Robert Duvall. Dang it, I couldn't remember his name. Yeah, Robert Duvall is Tom.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah. So I think Santino was short for. I think Sonny was short for Santino. Anyway, that's a long ways for something that's completely unrelated. That tangent is on me. Anyway, Santino is sleeping with his grandma upstairs. The other son is somewhere in the house, and then Jimmy's down on the couch. Or no, I'm sorry. The other son is in the car with Pedro. So that's the whole idea, is that he's freaked out, the autistic son. He won't leave the car. So Pedro's got to sleep out in the car with his older son, the autistic son. So anyway, in the middle of the night, mom comes creeping around. Sabrina comes creeping around with her old bloody hand, putting it on the window of the car. And, but the son's nonverbal. So like, he's not really, he can't really tell them what's happening. Ultimately, she goes inside and creeps into the bedroom with the mom, and the mom's kind of drowsy. She mentioned she's taking her sleeping pills.
She took her Ambien.
Come on, Ma. Yes, maybe one night you don't take the Ambien. But anyway, she's up there with the son, and Sabrina, who's all gooned up. Her face is all mashed up, and she's all fucked. And she takes Santino, and then Jimmy hears something happening. The grandma comes downstairs, alerts Jimmy. They come get Pedro. By the time Pedro runs inside, she's already got Santino, and she's standing upstairs. And Pedro's like, give me my kid. And she's like, no, this is my kid. I came to take my children or whatever. And she jumps off the balcony. And then they look down and she's gone. And that made me think that if they would have shot her 6 times, that might have solved the situation, but probably not, judging from the fact that she was up and running. Anyway, so they're like, oh my God, she's got Santino. We got to save him, blah, blah, blah. And Mirta explains that the demon now is trapped in the mind of the autistic son. And it's kind of like this was kind of a weird plot point for me. that like she had seen this before where and I think this is a trope that exists in other movies or stories too, because I feel like I've seen this before, but maybe not, that like people who are like not even necessarily just autism, but that have like some sort of like mental disability, they are like a Rubik's cube for demons, that gets them stuck. Which is, I don't know, rubs me the wrong way a little bit. It feels a little bit reductive and like, I don't know, like their brain is like a trap for demons. I feel like I've seen that trope before, but that's what she explains. Yeah,
I feel like I've seen or heard that before, but it's like I can't put my finger on if it's been a movie or like. I feel like there's also just been like claims of autistic people being possessed.
Yeah.
Like
that was definitely like a thing, way back in, hundreds of years ago. Like if you had some sort of like severe mental illness, they were just like, oh, that's a dang old devil in your brain. Well,
I mean, there's even been a shit ass pastor who said that shit like 2 years ago. So,
oh yeah, I'm sure there's some fuckwad who's saying that nowadays, and making people hold snakes, and well, God knows whatever else.
Yeah.
But yeah, so they do suggest that that's the case, and basically she goes on to say that don't go after the son. You have to stay here, and we're gonna, she's essentially a cleaner, right? So she needs her exorcism stuff and needs everyone to stay here and be calm, because the demon, yes, is in the wife, but also the demon is kind of everywhere. And you have to understand that you can't go running around like a maniac, because that's what they want you to do. And you going after them is just you giving them more power because of your fear of what's going to happen to your son.
Right.
So the whole seventh rule here is like, basically don't be afraid. Like it manipulates you through your fear. And she also kind of comes to explain at this point that there's different stages of the possession. Like the possession is almost like a virus, in that there is like, it's almost like it's some sort of like spore forming entity or something.
Yeah. It has like it has like a mycology network to it, because what it's doing is it's all in service of Uriel. And Uriel is like the main host that apparently is going to give birth to a real life demon at some point, is what we're told. But like he has, because of his presence, he has, this network that he can expand himself out over, which is why, like all the animals in the area are trouble, and, children are susceptible, and anybody who feels anything can actually, be taken advantage of in some way.
So he's almost, I took it as this, like, he's almost like the egg sac or like the placenta or something of the demon. But also like, because she basically says like the demon exists now only in its like emotional influence over people. But obviously it can take over dead bodies and stuff like that. But it is like a free form entity. It's basically like a ghost right now, and it can do ghost stuff, hopping from people to people, and it can jump into it can give Dan Aykroyd a BJ or do whatever ghosts do, and jump into people and make people manipulate stuff. But it doesn't have a physical form yet. And ultimately, what she calls the rotten, which is Uriel, which is the big pussy guy, he is like I said, the egg sac, almost for what is going to birth the actual physical demon. So he's kind of the egg of the possession.
Yeah. It was funny in this scene too, because she's also opening up like her case of tools, as she's explaining them to Pedro, or she's explaining what's going on to Pedro, but she's also prepping her tools. And like she opened the case, and in the case is like, it looks like a telescope or survey equipment, and there's a little photo of a guy in the case. Yeah. And I was like, who's that guy? So
I know who's the guy. It's like but there's also like weird little gyroscopes. It's like it's almost a little bit steampunk, a little bit Castlevania. Like there's just a lot of little tools and weird instruments in there.
So what I did is I took a screenshot of the little guy, and I ran him through Bing image search, and it returned a result for me.
What is it?
It was just a photo of an actual surveyor from like the 1900s that they took and photoshopped his survey equipment to look more goofy and, you know, like steampunky. I was like, oh, it's not anything. Like, there's no actual lore to this.
They just Googled like surveyor and were like, we want a picture of a guy doing this hypothetical thing.
Yeah. They just found a guy on Wiki. I think it's like Wiki Commons. So it's like the common, you know, photos you can use of
it's the public domain photos.
Yeah, public domain photos of like this guy. I think his name was like Overton Brendan or some shit like that. And they're just like, okay, take this guy and make his equipment look a little more steampunky and like diabolic or whatever.
Yeah, it's weird. Like, she has a lot of little like spring-loaded like wheels and like I said, little like viewing instruments and stuff like that. But you never really know what she she's actually going to do with them.
Yeah.
But anyway,
and you saw these earlier too. These were the same tools that were next to the legs at the beginning of the film
when they found the dead cleaner in the woods, right? So anyway, so she's explaining that like what that suggests, that the fact that the possession is still active and people are getting jumped into and all this stuff means that the rotten, or Uriel, is alive. He's still alive. And they're like, well, shit, what happened to him? And they're basically like, wait, you moved the rotten to another location? And they're like, yeah. And she's like, you guys are fucking idiots. Like, so the whole thing is like Pedro and Jimmy, especially Pedro, they're both just goddamn morons. Like, there's no other way about it.
Yeah, Pedro is the most consistent fuck up. Like, because
he's such a clown.
He was fucking up before the movie started. You know, that's how he lost his kids. He lost his house. And now he's fucking up now. He just stays fucking up.
And he always be fucking up. And he never really redeems it ever. Spoiler.
No,
he just fucks up constantly. But, you know, so at this point, shit has hit the fan in town. You don't see it, but they allude to it in a pretty creative way because, you know, Mirta is outside and she's like, oh, look, the lights from the nearby town that's like miles away, there's no lights from the town, which means that they've cut off the power grid. And that's one of the steps in the like demonic public service protocol for when a demonic outbreak happens, is they shut off the power grid because electric lights, give them power or conduit or something like that. So it was kind of a cool concept that there is. I just like the idea that there is a public safety protocol for demon possession, like out in the real world. Was kind of cool.
Yeah. Time to everybody shut the lights off. Stop feeling things.
Everyone stop feeling. So anyway, so Mirta gives us a little more of her backstory, and she's been, her and her husband were basically like kind of preachers, but they were like kind of charlatan preachers. She's like pretty open about the fact that they were like just frauds. And then when shit hit the fan, again, this has been over 12 years ago at this point, the churches all basically went away, and these monks, which they don't really get into the details of who they are, but again, this is some sort of like ancient mystics of some sort, have figured out this way to deal with demons, or had been doing this for presumably a long time. And they taught them how to do it. So she was taught by the people who, had learned how to deal with demons over, assumedly a long period of time.
She also used and it's, I don't know if it's a translation thing or just like a slang thing, but she refers to the monks as cobras. Like, that's when the cobras came. And I was like,
yeah, at first I was like, do you mean like a plague, like locusts, but it's cobras? Or is it like Cobra Commander? Like literally, the cobras showed up and they tried to fight the demons, but then, I don't know.
Yeah, that's the one thing. It just didn't, I don't know if it's like Argentinian slang that didn't like, it just doesn't translate well. It maybe. I wasn't
sure about that. I took it as like that's lore that we don't really know about and aren't really meant to know that much about, but it's just like a thing that gets you thinking, just a world building, minor world building element. But anyway, Jimmy finds, this is a great scene. This might be my favorite scene in the movie. Jimmy is out because the whole idea is Pedro can't go look for the kid because that's going to make the demon know that he cares, and he's going to eat up his weird fear for the safety of his kid. So he's like, you guys stay here, figure out how you're going to deal with the demon that's kind of trapped in the older son. I'm going to go look for Demon Sabrina and your younger son. So Jimmy's out driving about and he's kind of flicking the lights on and off, you know, because he doesn't want the lights to be on too long. But he's driving on this like almost look like a path in like a park or something like that. And he sees Sabrina up ahead and she's carrying the kid, and you know something's not great right off the bat. You know this ain't going to be that great. And he's like driving up along her, and it's almost like I'm going to try to make light of it because it's a brutal scene. Yeah. But it's almost like that scene in Old School where they drive up beside Will Ferrell when he's running naked, and he's like, you know, get in the car. And he's like, you think KFC's still open? It's a little bit like that. Close. Except for instead of that, he pulls up along him, and Sabrina is carrying the kid, and he's dead. And she has basically like reaching into his skull and is eating his brains like a bag of Fritos. Is the only way I can describe what's happening. She is
arm deep in a Pringles can of kid head is what it is.
Yeah.
It is rough.
Not cool.
Yeah. It
is really brutal.
It is super not cool. That was the second reaction that this movie pulled out of me after the dog scene. It was like different reactions too, because the dog scene was just like building tension, and it's just like, just pull the trigger, let it happen all over. This was a reveal of something gross happening. I was just like, oh.
This is one where I said, kind of reminiscent, speaking of Terrifier 2, of like the scene with all the salt and this, where I was just like, Jesus Christ. Like this is just a brutal scene.
Bit much, bud. Bit much.
Yeah. You went going a little hard there. All right. So Jimmy obviously loses it when he sees this, and he rams her. Smashes Sabrina, Demon Sabrina with the car. And in the accident, he's like, banged up, and he kind of loses consciousness for a minute. And then he wakes up, and she's like hanging on the windshield, all demoned out, and starts talking to Jimmy. And this is another thing that like, it's just hinted at, and it doesn't necessarily pay a lot of dividends later. But the whole idea that there's no real good guys in this movie, because she suggests that Jimmy and her were having an affair
at some point.
So at some point, Jimmy was banging his brother's wife.
Yeah. And
the only real relationship that feels like it has any longevity in this movie, because like at this point, you're like, oh, the kids are all going to die. Like, everyone's going to be dead.
Yeah.
But the only really like close relationship that you're experiencing here is between Jimmy and Pedro, the brothers, and then maybe Jimmy or Pedro and his older son, the one he's like, sleeping in the car with and all that stuff. The other son, you're like, this ain't gonna. I mean, he's already dead at this point, but even earlier on, you're like, this kid. Oh, as soon as the other kid became a Scooby snack earlier, you're like, that kid's gonna go too. Probably.
Yeah, that kid's also in danger. Everybody's in danger now. It doesn't matter.
Yeah,
and
this is a mean movie.
Yeah, and also like Santino he was a little bit annoying. I'm not gonna lie. He's just constantly.
He didn't need to be a Pringles can, but
no. He didn't deserve.
You didn't have to do him like that.
Yeah, you didn't have to do him like that, but just like constantly asking questions, constantly being annoying. Like, give me the phone. I want to talk to mommy. I want to do this. I want to do that. It's like, just can you chill? Can you tell that we're having a problem at the moment? Read the room, Santino. Jesus.
Yeah. I didn't necessarily think his brains were going to get eaten, but sure.
Right.
Anyway, so back to Mirta's house, and the autistic. So grandma's kind of dozing on the chair. Pedro and Mirta decide that they basically like, you moved the rotten. You're an asshole. Where did you move him to? And he's like, well, here's what happened. Fell out of the truck when we almost hit a kid on the road going to school. So there's got to be a school near there. So he's probably somewhere near there. So they're just going. So this was the only part that I was like, that's a little far fetched. They just go into this area and like, oh, they stumble upon a school. It just felt very Silent Hill-y for some reason during this part, which I was like, really, the first place you go is the place they're keeping him. But anyway, they go looking on out there for him. So the grandma is staying at Mirta's house with the autistic son, and she's just like kind of chilling on the couch. And all of a sudden, the autistic son walks in, and he just strolls in and just starts talking to grandma just very normally. And like he was completely nonverbal before and has been presumably, his whole life. And he's just pops in, is like, Grandma, I'm hungry. I need something to eat. And I'm cold. So I'm coming inside. And she's like, cool. And he kind of does this like weird thing where he like touches her shoulder and you're like, something bad's happening with the son.
Yeah.
Yeah. But you don't know what's going on. You don't know if he's just possessed. You don't know if this is a side effect of his brain, trapping the demon. You don't know. But it just leaves it at that. And then you head off to the schoolhouse where, Mirta and Pedro had predicted, that, hey, this kid was on his way to school. It must be here, whatever. So this is where the rotten is going to be, apparently.
Yeah. And she does have a pretty tight line about it, which explains it, because she's like, we probably left the body out by the school. And she's like, well, that's where we got to go because evil loves children and children love evil. And it's like, yeah, that's true. Children love evil. That's their favorite thing.
Kids love evil. If there's one thing I know kids love, it's Fruity Pebbles and evil.
Yeah,
but
they're into it.
But so they go right there and they walk inside, and there's a bunch of kids sitting in the classroom. It's like middle of the night, and they're all creepy looking kids. They're sitting in this classroom, and So first of all, earlier on, Jer or what is his name? How do you pronounce it?
Jair.
Yeah, he had apparently drawn some sort of picture, or one of the sons had drawn some sort of picture that Pedro opened up and saw in the back of the car, and it was like a family and like a sunset and everyone holding hands. And you're like, oh, it's just like a kid drawing like a cute little thing. Mm-hmm. Well, then one of the first things you see when you walk into the school is that drawing on one of the windows. So obviously whatever kid drew that knew where the rotten was. Like he had been infected in some capacity, well before that. And so, you go in and some of the kids are possessed. Some of them look like they might not be possessed. Like one of them's spitting out goo. There's white powder everywhere, which you're not really sure what that is. And you're like, well, there's one kid who kind of seems like she's maybe not possessed. And then there's other ones who are like spitting out goo that are definitely possessed.
Yeah. It looks like the one, because I think they're in a line too, but there's one girl who has like her eyes closed and she's crying, and she seems like she's not possessed because she's like talking and crying. And then the girl behind her is just eating handfuls of paste, is what it looks like.
Yeah.
She just went all in on an Elmer's bucket. So it's
Yeah. She had a value meal with the side of Elmer's glue.
Yeah.
And she's also just like, eyes are all fucked up. So like some of these kids are in a bad spot. And Mirta's basically like, these kids are protecting the rotten. Like the rotten is here somewhere and they're all sitting here waiting because they're protecting it. Right. And they're like, get the fuck up out of here, whatever. They go outside. Pedro's kind of losing it. Then all of a sudden they see the kid walking with the bike, the kid that they almost hit earlier when they actually lost Uriel, which is the quote unquote the rotten. And he's just kind of pushing his bike up towards the school. And he's like, hey bro, what are you doing? Like what's going on? And the kid with the bike is they're basically saying like, what does he tell him? I'm trying to, Bike Kid says that, it's at my teacher's house.
Yeah. I think he
Cortez.
says, right. Yeah. It's up at Mr. Cortez's house is where it's at.
And you're like, so maybe you have to go to a different location. But Mirta's like, nah, like he's trying to get us, he's trying to send us on a wild goose chase. Don't believe the kids because the kids are all possessed. And then the one kid who seems not possessed comes out and is like, don't listen to him. It's at my house. They're keeping Uriel at my house and it's right up the road, whatever. And Pedro just kind of goes batshit on this little girl and just starts beating the shit out of her and strangling her. And I was like, whoa, dude, relax.
He fucking busts her with a truck door. Like he knocks her down with a truck door and jumps on top of her and just starts wailing on her.
Yeah, it's pretty serious. But then you quickly realize that, like, no, she's obviously part of them and she's possessed too. But like at that moment, you kind of don't know if she is or not. Anyway, but Mirta knows the whole thing is a trap and basically says, like, you know, Pedro, you're stupid because he wants to go, because anything Pedro wants, like, that's the wrong thing. He's a moron. And then she's just saying that, no, if they're trying to get us to go somewhere else, that means Uriel is here. They're trying to draw us away from him. So like I said, Pedro beats up a child and they go back inside. She's like, no, he's got to be here somewhere. And you go in and the kids are all possessed and they're all just kind of lurking around in the corners. But not really bothering them, but just kind of staring at them. And he finds this like area of this like stage. It's kind of a multi-purpose room, I'll say.
Yeah.
And there's like a stage, and some of the boards on the stage are like partially pulled up. And he starts pulling them up, and he finds that all the parents are dead, or most of them are dead, and they're like being stored. Bodies are being stored in the stage, and there's a bunch of like lime everywhere, which is supposedly, you know, supposed to help with the smell. But anyway, she's saying the Uriel, the rotten, is probably in there with all the bodies. So there's this whole weird scene where Pedro is tearing apart the stage and digging out the bodies of the parents, and all the kids are just kind of like lurking around, like watching him. And you don't know if they're going to do anything, but they're all just like little kids, like between the ages of probably like 7 and 10. Right.
Yeah.
But they don't seem like they have a lot of agency or really know what they're going to do or how they can prevent this, or if they really want to prevent this. You don't really know. And the whole time Mirta is setting up her tools again, all her little, you know, doodads and doohickeys and, you know, stuff for, you know, doing anti-demon experiments.
Yeah, her demon sextant or whatever it is that she's putting on.
Yeah, just setting up all this shit. And for some reason, all of a sudden because the whole thing is like, don't rush, don't show, you know, a lot of like urgency. Excuse me. Don't show a lot of urgency, because they're like the fear that you display, they'll use that. But then all of a sudden she starts going like, hurry up, we're running out of time. And all of a sudden there's this big time crunch, which was a little bit weird for me. That was the one thing that kind of was stuck, you know, I don't know if it was some sort of like, am I missing something? Why all of a sudden there's this sense of urgency?
Yeah, I don't know. I think that's the one just kind of where it falls apart, is just like, there was nothing to signal the urgency. Like we weren't told of a ticking clock beforehand. So it's just like, I think she just didn't want to panic him before, but maybe there was just urgency that she knew about, but she didn't let on.
Yeah. Or like the kids were kind of encroaching on them, and maybe she thought the kids, like, as they were getting close to what's happening, the kids were going to kind of, you know, go wild on them. But this is probably my least favorite part of the movie. I mean, it's not a bad scene. It's just the logic is a little bit messed up, because they're trying to so he pulls him out of there. He finally finds the rotten. He finds Uriel, and he's like buried in this pile of bodies under the stage. And he's in there and he's still alive. And he's like, hey, kill me. Remember me? Yeah, you should kill me. You should kill me now. And he's like manipulating him. Right. And he's basically saying, like, if you kill me now, you can still save your son. Meanwhile, he doesn't know the son is already dead. But he's like, Pedro is so easily manipulated.
Such an idiot.
Like at every turn.
Yeah.
He and the one kid just easily tricks him and basically says, like, hey, go into the other room. There's an axe. You can go in there, get the axe, kill him. And like, you could still save your son, because like, if you do it with an axe, it's better. And she's like, Mirta's like, no, don't, just shut up. Don't listen to them. Don't do it. And he's like, no, I'm going to go get this axe. Bye. And he runs into the other room, and they immediately lock him in the room.
Right.
And as soon as they lock him in the room, they just brain Myrta, like with a hammer.
Yeah.
They just smack her in the head with a hammer. And I was like, why didn't they do that a second ago? I guess they thought that Pedro would like be able to defend her, I guess, is the suggestion.
It's more or less just like,
because she's like an elderly woman. So
now it's, 5-on-1 on an elderly woman, and we have a hammer. Whereas like we already seen Pedro will go toe to toe with one kid and take him down. So
he's not afraid to beat up kids. Like that's the one thing in the world he's good at is beating up a kid. He's a total fucking loser and useless in every other sense, except for when it comes to beating up kids.
Yeah. Like the demon probably already knew. He's like, oh, he has like time going toe to toe with his two other sons, so like he'll just unleash on these kids. So I gotta isolate him.
Yeah, but they do. It's a fairly brutal scene. They're just like, there's a slow drawn out, like they really linger on the violence and gore in this movie. And like, they're dragging Myrto away, and the one little girl is just kind of lazily smacking her in the forehead with a hammer. Yeah. Like just kind of like raising it, letting it drop almost like on her forehead. It's just like thump, thump.
Yeah, because she's a little kid. Like, I mean, she can't put really more force behind it than gravity will. So she just lets it go and just bonks her.
She was. You're just giving him an old bonk, about 5 or 6 bonks. And then Uriel, as he breaks down the door, comes out too late. Myrta's, already got brained. And Uriel just kind of pops up from the stage like the VHS cover of Ghoulies. Like he's just like, hey, what's up? Yeah. Pops up above the stage with his big, swollen, grotesque, pussy head. And Pedro, being an idiot, because he does everything wrong, he's a moron, grabs her little, surveying scope and bashes in Uriel's head with this instrument. Yeah.
This is such a perfect like end and response. If you're not going to have Pedro fucking ever learn anything, this is the perfect response of just he, as a dumb animal, a Neanderthal, a buffoon, takes a machine that he doesn't know how to work and like would actually solve his problems if it worked properly, and just bashes it like a caveman. He
tries to solve the problem with just brute force. Like it's a caveman, picking up an iPhone and going, do I eat this? And just trying to take a bite of it. And then, after he kills Uriel, like it immediately kind of like the rotten almost like splits open, and you see this what looks like kind of a probably 8 or 10-year-old boy, just like naked, covered in blood, emerge from Uriel. And this is of course the demon being physically born, and it just beep boop up just kind of marches out of the room. As he's passing Pedro, he just kind of almost anoints him on the forehead, just kind of lazily with his bloody fingers, and puts this blood streaks down Pedro's forehead. So Pedro, at this point just can't stop fucking up, So Pedro goes back to Myrta's house and rejoins, what he assumes is his remaining family, which is Jimmy, his older son, and his mom. And he first of all takes a shower. Sure. Can't get the blood that's on his forehead off, so it's like kind of permanent on there. So that's not a good sign. And Jimmy goes back to him and Pedro's place, and Uriel's brother, from earlier, the one that they had to go sleep in the barn, is still there in the barn, and basically says like, he's like, what the fuck are you doing here? And he says he's the one who killed the original cleaner, the one that was coming to kill Uriel in the first place. Uriel's brother killed him, and basically says like, I don't know, fucking voices told me to do it kind of thing. And he also explains that he fed part of the torso to the pigs, but also ate some of it himself. And he basically said, what happened to your mom, which is that Maria woman from the beginning? And he says, same thing that happened to your mom.
Yeah.
And he's like, what? Well, cut back to Myrta's place, and Pedro has just gotten out of the shower, and he's given his older son the bowl of the apple ice cream or whatever, and he's sitting there eating it.
Well, this isn't Myrta's place. This is just still their place. Because
I thought that they were still at... No, yeah, you're right. They all had come back to his place. Yeah. Yeah. So Jimmy just went out to the barn. Yeah, because he's still there. I forgot. They're still in the same property.
Because there's just like a couple... there's just a couple like a scene setting things that we've seen throughout the movie. We didn't talk about them, but like one of them is the freezer is always full of that apple ice cream because he finally pulls it out and gives it to Javier at the end of the film. And then there's another thing that Jimmy's been doing that we didn't address, but like early on, Jimmy has pulled out a bullet for a gun, which looks like a handgun bullet. And now at this point, he's pulled out 3 bullets. So he's ready to just like do a missed ending is what he's ready for.
Yeah. You see that happening. And so he's got them all the bullets laid out. And you're like, oh, what's going to happen here? But the older son who's eating the ice cream is kind of like choking on it. And he's like, hey, buddy, like slow down. And he goes over and he's like kind of choking on the spoon. He like takes the spoon out of his mouth, and then with it comes blood and hair and chunks. Yeah. And then eventually the mom's like necklace.
Yeah.
And you realize that the older son had eaten the grandma.
Yeah. Yeah.
Dun, dun, dun. Dun, dun, dun. Yeah. The old eating the grandma routine. Yep. And of course, when he realized what happened here, he's like, what the F? He goes outside. It just kind of like crumbles onto the lawn, like crying, just being a real baby about the whole thing. Really.
Pretty much.
And then you do this like slow pan out as Pedro just like kind of cries on his knees in the yard, and Jimmy just kind of like wanders around like on the truck. And it's just like, I don't know. And then that's it. Just linger on that, like just super depressing scene. And then the credits roll. And it's just the only thing that would have made it better was just if it was like, and then it just credits.
If it just cut to a scene that said the Aristocrats.
Yeah. Or if like just Porky Pig came out, I was like, that's all, folks. Yeah. And that's the end of it. But to say a bleak ending, I would say that's really the definition of a bleak ending. Mm-hmm. The mom dies, all the kids die. The only one that's left is Pedro and Jimmy. And they're probably going to kill themselves. That's kind of what's heavily suggested.
And hungry Javier. So.
Hungry Javier. He is. Yeah. You're right. He's there too. But there's not a lot of coming back from eating grandma.
No. It is great though. Part of the film is like how much stuff is kind of reflexive, or like something's revealed and you can go back and it explains something else in a film. Mm-hmm. Like I was talking about the first scene with the axe attack and everything. She hits him with the axe to stop. And then we see later on, Leo shoots the dog and he does become possessed. Yes. We get the, we get the drawing and everything. And then the payoff on that is like, those kids were just predicting walking off into the sun with the demon is what they were predicting. Right. It's not a family. It's the demon that they were worshiping.
Yeah.
And then,
Myrta. I guess I didn't even make that connection.
Yeah.
But that was the whole art is like, no, you're just we're all going to go worship this demon. It's going to be sick.
Yeah. It's going to be sick. We're going to start a new family.
He's all bloody. He's got a bloody butt. We're going to get him all cleaned up. And then we're going to have a cool demon family.
We're going to have a cool demon friend now. And then, Myrta is telling the story of the original possession. And the original possession is that somebody walked into their church and started throwing up, first like regular vomit and then blood and chunks of the family they ate. So it pays
she does
off.
Tell a grisly little story about, that earlier. Yeah.
Yeah. And then we have the last bit I'll mention is the kid from, Uriel's younger brother.
Mm.
He,
yeah, I never wrote his name down.
Yeah, I don't have it down either for whatever reason. Mm-hmm. But the payoff at the end is like we find out that he's been possessed the whole time. So when he shows up at the beginning of the film, or not the beginning, but like, 20 minutes in or whatever, to tell Pedro and Jimmy what happened to Ruiz, he is doing what the kids do later of lying. I mean, maybe not necessarily lying, but he's stoking their fear to get them to run away.
Yes.
So because he's already possessed. Spread it. Yeah. So yeah. It's I don't know, just it's a really, really clever movie, even though the ending is just fucking down notes all the way down.
Well, and it's it's hard to suggest or cry realism when you're talking about like a demon possession movie.
Right, yeah.
But if there was a like some sort of ancient demon that has spent, presumably millennia manipulating humankind, it feels more believable or digestible that Pedro ain't gonna solve it.
Right. Exactly.
I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. He's just going to be this is just him eating shit, basically. Mm-hmm. Wrong place, wrong time situation.
Yeah. Of all the opportunities he has to learn and grow, and then just doesn't, then it makes sense that ultimately he fails because he just doesn't learn. And that's why it's punctuated with him cavemanning, with a piece of equipment that he has no idea about.
It would have sucked if it would have been like Pedro has a 5-minute redemption arc and then he saves the day. That would have sucked.
Or Jimmy read the instruction booklet to the sextant, while he was, running over Sabrina or whatever. Like after he got done with that, he went back and picked up the case from the torso.
There was a montage of him studying at the library.
Right, yeah. That would have been stupid too. So
and he he stumbles into the basement and finds demonology books and it's like, we need a hero. And he just reads them and learns how to kill a demon.
Yeah.
So it's good. It's like I said, it's bleak. It is not a feel good movie. Mm-mm. Although I will say it is paced really well and it keeps your attention.
Oh yeah.
And there is nothing boring about this. It's not I think the runtime's about an hour 40, which is not short. It's not overly long. But it's tight. It feels quick.
Yeah. And it's because you're injected into a world that has so much going on that you don't know what's going on because either you're picking up on the presented action or you're trying to follow along with what you're learning about the world, that you're just constantly active in your watching as compared to here's the cool down scene where we don't have to pay attention to what the dialogue is.
Nope. It's pretty bang, 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 bang as far as, the plot moving along. But over the top, nothing over the top in terms of like I said, the exposition, you learn what's happening, in what feels like a pretty natural way. Like I said, love the world, lore building elements of it. It's a world I feel like I want to learn more about. Mm-hmm. And there's just infinite more stories you could tell in this world as well. I kind of hope they don't, because I feel like then that would, cheapen things a little bit. And, but if, like I said, if there was some sort of a spin-off, manga or something like that you could read and learn more about stories about this, I would be interested. But I think it's, when we have a conversation, in a couple of months at the end of the year, our favorite horror movies of the year, this one is definitely going to be up there for me. I like it a lot. Not necessarily something I'm going to watch a bunch of times.
No.
But I would definitely suggest this to somebody if it's looking for something pretty intense, new experience. I would definitely suggest this one.
Yeah, definitely way over Exorcist Believer.
I still haven't watched it. I've heard such horrible things about it.
Yeah, but everything I've heard is it's cut, it's cut and paste, and just also doing the same kind of bring back the feels of oh, here's Ellen Burstyn and here's a Reagan cameo and blah blah blah, and it's who cares?
I mean, I'm probably going to watch it, but yeah, I'm going in. It probably helps that I'm going in with lower expectations, but
yeah.
Anywho, any final thoughts on When Evil Lurks?
I like this a lot better than Terrified. Terrified has some great moments and scenes in it.
Yeah.
But like, I just overall never really cared for the story of like ghosts are mushroom spores from another dimension. And then the ending, I didn't like that part about it. So like, but like Terrified has good stuff. So I still suggest to watch it because I think it's still better than other ghost stories. But yeah, this one's up there with maybe one of my favorite like possession films now. Is like, yeah.
I weirdly enough, like this does seem like a little bit more of a, kind of fully actualized, version of something like Terrified, even though it's a different setting, very different movie. It seems a little bit similar. Like it feels like there was concepts that, he liked from that one and, kind of polished them up a little bit more in this. But there's still some of the same hallmarks. Like I said, there's going to be creepy dead kid shit.
Yep.
There's going to be some really genuinely scary parts. There was nothing really in terms of like adding levity in this movie. Whereas in Terrified, at least there was a couple of, parts where they're doing the like almost the paranormal investigation-y portion of that, where there is a little bit of slapsticky type of stuff. That's not played purely for laughs, but is like, there's more like personality type levity to it. It's not, VHS 85 where they're farting in the tunnel or whatever, but it's like there is some levity to it. There's some cool down moments, whereas like, this one doesn't feel like it has any cool down moments.
Yeah, the only levity is that brief exchange between Pedro and Jimmy about how Jimmy likes to bang, and that's it.
Yeah. And even then it feels more heartfelt than like, Jimmy be Jimmy. And
Jimmy likes to take down a cougar. Hell yeah.
He does. All right, guys, that was When Evil Lurks from 2023. Definitely go check it out. I watched it on Shudder. I think it's kind of a Shudder exclusive streaming situation now. You could probably go buy it somewhere else. I don't know that. I don't know for sure, but that's where I watched it. So go find it, check it out. Absolutely worth a watch. Like I said, it ain't gonna make you feel good, but it's a fun movie.
Yeah.
And just as a reminder, going into our showdown episode for next month, if you want to get out in front of these, if you want to watch a couple of these movies, or maybe watch one you haven't seen before, or refresh yourself, something like that, ahead of our discussion, we're going to have TK from Hops and Box Office Flops, and he's going to talk about, in our revenge horror showdown for November, he's going to talk about You're Next from 2011. Your boy is going to talk about Mandy from 2018, and then Steve going all the way back to 1984. This is the second month in a row where we talk about 2000s movies and you talk about an 80s movie, which is kind of a weird role reversal for us.
Working for Mr. October.
Yeah, Steve's going to go with The Toxic Avenger from 1984. So that should be a lot of fun. And as always, if you want to get some spooky ookies on the internet, every damn day, and another episode on the podcast every Monday. Go follow us, subscribe, do the little plus sign thing on your podcatcher app, on your Apple, Apple Podcasts, your Spotify's, or whatever the hell you use, Amazon Music, whatever. We're on all that stuff. And follow us on the social medias. We're actually we're almost at 10,000 followers on Instagram. We're very dang close. We're at like 9,900 and something. So we're like, hopefully, here in the next few days, if we could get to 10,000 by the end of the year, I think that would be very doable. We might even, who knows, make it to 10,000 next few days if we get a little spike on there. So help us get there. That'll be really fun as well. Anything else, Steve, I'm forgetting about?
No. Go on the Patreon, find out what all the 31 days of recommendations were, because I got a whole bunch, you jerks.
We're there. It's guys, we got 2 more nights. If you're listening to this today, it comes out, it's Hell Night. First of all, it shouldn't be watching movies, you should be out doing crimes. And if you're not doing crimes, if you're all crimed out and you're at the end of the night and you wash all the blood off you and you're done doing crimes and hailing Satan and you're looking for a spooky movie, go on there to patreon.com/Halloween is forever. If you become a patron, you can get all of Steve's spooky recos for the month of October. And then, of course, you have Halloween. You got to watch something great on Halloween, so you can take advantage of that. And then after Halloween's over, when you want to take a break from horror movies, you can go listen to us talk about Fast and the Furious, which is perhaps even more scary than this movie. So check that out. Family is Forever. It's that exclusive podcast on our page, only for our patrons on Patreon, rather.
Mm-hmm.
So, all right. Anything else I'm forgetting?
That's it.
That's about it. All right, boys and ghouls. Well, listen, I ain't going to talk to you till after spooky season, after the official end of spooky season, Halloween. So be safe. Have a spooky, ooky time out there. Like I said, do crimes, hail Satan, and we'll talk to you next week when we get into that revenge horror for November Showdown. All right, see you later.
Happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween. Spooky.